In 1958, Detroit stood at the peak of its power. American cars were getting longer, heavier, and flashier than ever before. People didn't just drive cars, they drove symbols of status and success. Amid that golden age, Mercury decided to go even bolder. They wanted to prove they could stand shoulder to shoulder with Cadillac and Lincoln. And so, they built the biggest, most luxurious, and most ambitious car in the brand's history. The 1958 Mercury Parklane. It was born to be Mercury's pride, yet just 1 year later, the name vanished from the lineup. No scandal, no accident, no explanation. So what really happened? Join me as we uncover the mystery behind the 1958 Mercury Parklane. A car built to shine, but erased before it could reach its moment of glory. By the mid-1950s, the Ford Motor Company faced a serious branding dilemma. The Ford name was thriving in the mass market, and Lincoln stood strong in the luxury class. But in between those two worlds, Mercury was adrift. Mercury had been created to bridge the gap between Ford and Lincoln, yet it struggled to define its own identity. Buyers saw it as an expensive Ford, while dealers couldn't decide whether to market it as a premium car or an entry-level luxury one. By 1957, Ford's leadership knew something had to change. Mercury would be elevated, not just in appearance, but in purpose. The goal was clear: bring it closer to Lincoln, offering middle-class Americans a taste of luxury without the Cadillac-sized price tag. And the Mercury Park Lane was created for that very purpose. The front end was a dazzling wall of metal. A twin rectangle grille stretched across the full width, framed in thick chrome and divided by a massive M emblem, a symbol of authority and elegance. The dual-stacked headlights were a brand-new feature for 1958, introduced after federal law finally permitted the design. Combined with the heavy chrome bumper, the Parklane's face looked powerful and dignified, like a general wearing a suit of silver armor. From the side, the Parklane captured the jet-age spirit, long, low, and full of motion. Twin chrome moldings ran the entire length of the body, creating the illusion of speed while balancing its proportions. The distinctive rear fender kick-up and sweeping chrome trim line were Mercury hallmarks, adding muscular grace to its large frame. At the rear, 1950s imagination reached its peak. The twin-jet taillights extended like jet exhausts, surrounded by chrome rings that gleamed like molten metal. The fins rose subtly, less dramatic than Cadillacs, but more refined and aerodynamic. Some models featured the optional Continental spare tire kit, turning the rear into a Hollywood-style spectacle. It doesn't stop there. When you step inside the Mercury Park Lane, you immediately understand why people called it a spaceship on four wheels. The cabin feels spacious, quiet, and filled with light. 6 adults can sit comfortably on the long sofa-style seats, surrounded by thick layers of insulation that completely separate them from the outside world. The dashboard of the Park Lane was one of the most distinctive designs to come out of Detroit in the late 1950s. The entire surface is gently curved, stretching across the full width of the cabin, reflecting the unmistakable jet-age influence. The upper section is padded with ribbed vinyl, while the lower half is trimmed with bright chrome, giving the impression of sitting inside the cockpit of an early commercial airliner. In front of the driver sat a trapezoid-shaped instrument cluster recessed into its own housing, featuring a horizontal sweep speedometer, a design that made the dashboard both technical and distinctive. Switches and knobs were neatly arranged, each with its own chrome bezel. Nothing cluttered, Nothing excessive, just enough to evoke a sense of precision and modernity. The four-spoke deep-dish steering wheel was the centerpiece of the cabin. Its deep-set hub and bright metallic ring, combined with two-tone black and ivory coloring, created a striking contrast. At its center, the chrome Mercury emblem stood proudly, a seal of refinement and authority. To the driver's left was the keyboard control, a push-button gear selector that replaced the traditional shift lever. Each mechanical click produced a satisfying precision, making the driver feel as if they were operating the control panel of a spacecraft. The seats were upholstered in two-tone leather or fine patterned fabric, harmonizing beautifully with the chrome-accented dashboard and embossed aluminum door panels. In top trim versions, the car offered air conditioning, a multi-band radio, an electric clock, and automatic lighting, luxuries that even many high-end competitors of the time didn't dare to offer. Behind all that refinement lies a completely different soul, because when you open the hood, you'll find what Detroit was most proud of at the time: the MEL 430 cubic inch V8, the legendary monster engine line from Ford. This engine was the direct result of Ford's ambition to push Mercury into the world of true luxury. With a displacement of 430 cubic inches, equivalent to 7.0 liters, the MEL V8 was shared with the Lincoln Continental and the Edsel Citation, but it was specially tuned for the Park Lane to achieve a perfect balance between smoothness and power. The engine featured angled combustion chambers, oversized pistons, and a 10.5:1 compression ratio, an astonishing figure for 1958. Combined with a Holley 4,154-barrel carburetor, the Park Lane could produce 400 horsepower and 490 pound-feet of torque, enough to propel its 4,500-pound body forward like a massive steel battleship. From the moment it moves, the car feels like it's gliding rather than rolling. The wide tires, thick coil spring suspension, and heavy frame absorb almost every vibration, isolating the cabin completely from the outside world. At highway speeds, the Park Lane remains remarkably stable despite its 220-inch length. The power steering is so light that you can turn the wheel with a single finger, making city driving effortless, but at the cost of connection. You don't feel the road beneath you. It's as if you're commanding a ship rather than driving a car. The 430 MEL V8 provides abundant torque across all speeds, while the 3-speed Mercury-matic automatic transmission shifts so smoothly you barely notice it working. But that very perfection makes the Park Lane feel soulless. There's no urgency, no tactile feedback, no sense of conversation between driver and machine, only silence, softness, and effortless motion. But this power came at a cost. The 430 MEL returned only about 8 to 10 miles per gallon, making the Mercury a true gas guzzler. However, when it debuted in the spring of 1958, the Mercury Park Lane was positioned as the most luxurious car ever built under the Mercury name. Its starting price of over $4,000, nearly matching a Cadillac Series 62, placed it well beyond the reach of most middle-class buyers. The very customers who had kept Mercury alive throughout the 1950s. Detroit believed Americans would gladly pay more for luxury, but they couldn't have chosen a worse moment. In 1958, the US economy fell into a deep recession, and car sales across the nation dropped sharply. Consumers tightened their budgets and shifted towards smaller, more economical cars. Meanwhile, the Park Lane represented the exact opposite: large, heavy, and expensive. The market's reaction was unexpectedly cold. Despite praise for its smoothness and dramatic styling, Park Lane sold only about 11,000 units, a figure far below expectations. Against rivals like the Buick Roadmaster or the Oldsmobile 98, Mercury barely stood a chance. Yet that failure wasn't Mercury's alone. The year 1958 marked the moment when all of Detroit paid the price for the illusion that bigger, flashier, and more luxurious was always better. As the US economy slipped into recession, consumers suddenly turned their backs on massive, expensive, fuel-hungry cars. They began gravitating towards smaller, more practical models, signaling a new wind sweeping through the American auto industry. The major brands all suffered the same fate. Buick saw sales plunge by more than 30%. Oldsmobile lost tens of thousands of loyal customers. DeSoto, once praised for its refinement, virtually disappeared within just a few years. Even Cadillac, the symbol of wealth and prestige, had to cut back production just to survive. In that climate, the Park Lane became a lost battleship, born from Ford's finest engineering, yet arriving at the exact moment when the world began turning away from dreams made of steel and chrome. After the failure of 1958, Ford realized that Mercury could no longer chase the same luxury dream as Lincoln. They had to change direction. By 1959, the Park Lane lineup was drastically scaled down. Less chrome, cleaner styling, and lower prices to win back middle-class buyers. Yet the scars of the crisis remained, and Mercury needed more than a facelift to save its image. In 1961, the Park Lane name was discontinued entirely, replaced by more practical models like the Monterey and Meteor. For Ford, it was a strategic retreat, repositioning Mercury back to its middle-class roots, bridging the gap between everyday Ford buyers and luxury-seeking Lincoln owners. Detroit believed the chrome dream was over, but history has a way of circling back. Just 3 years later, in 1964, the Park Lane name unexpectedly returned, this time not as a symbol of excess, but as a representation of refined luxury and high performance. The new generation featured a cleaner, more confident design and powerful V8 engines, embodying a different kind of prestige, quieter, sharper, and more disciplined. Still, the Park Lane of the 1960s was only a shadow of the 1958 legend. It no longer carried the same ambition or weight of symbolism. More than 6 decades later, the Park Lane name has vanished from Ford's lineup. Yet its image, the massive grille, the sweeping rear fins, and the deep rumble of the 430 V8 still lives on in the hearts of classic car enthusiasts. Today, when people look back at the 1958 Mercury Park Lane, they realize it didn't fail because it was flawed, but because it arrived too early, at a time when America simply wasn't ready for it. The complex chrome lines, the enormous proportions, and the lavish interior that once symbolized excess are now celebrated by collectors as masterpieces of the jet age. At auctions, an original Park Lane in pristine condition can fetch over $60,000, many times its original price. Cars once forgotten in barns are now meticulously restored, standing as monuments to an era when Detroit dared to think big and dream even bigger. Classic car historians now regard the Park Lane as proof of the philosophy that luxury is meant to be felt, not explained. It was never practical, nor was it made for the masses. The Park Lane was created to remind us that there was once a time when the American automobile industry spoke only one language: boldness. If you love stories about forgotten cars, help keep them alive. Hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell. And join me on this journey to uncover more of Detroit's forgotten legends, the machines that once defined an era. Every like, every comment keeps stories like the Mercury Park Lane alive, not just through words, but through the passion of classic car enthusiasts around the world. If you believe that every car deserves to be remembered, even after time has forgotten it, share this video, because sometimes all it takes is one person remembering to bring a legend back to life.